Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott, back again for another episode of the Nolecast. As always, we will thank our friends Tarpon Cellars Wine Company. Great people out of Napa Valley, title sponsor of the Nolecast. Wonderful to hear great feedback from them, Bud. I set up a call with our friend Jeremy earlier this week. Just wanted to make sure that we're giving them the same type of response that the legendary team or Congruity gets. And if we have a great home loan experience, we get an email. If we have a new partner with Congruity, I could jump on the phone call with Matt Lewis. We kind of don't know exactly the immediate feedback from Tarpon Sellers, but everything's been fantastic. It's my understanding. I think 6 of our listeners have now gone on vineyard visits out there, which is just fantastic and probably something that you and I should do, Bud. But great people at Tarpon Sellers, fantastic wine. We love working with them, and thank you so much the support that you, the listener, have given them.
That's actually a great idea, man. We should take the girls to go to Tarpon.
We should.
That'd be dope.
And then maybe we'll set up Nolecast weekends in the future where 10 listeners and ourselves can have experiences in California and somehow claim that as a business expense. So sounds great. All right, man. So interesting times in the college football world. We've got some stuff to jump on here. Have some listener questions that have some some length and substance to them. So we'll try to leave those times. But let's talk real quickly about some of the scheduling conversation that's out there from the ACC, what they're trying to do from a TV standpoint. If you're a listener to this podcast, you're probably well aware that there's nothing that the ACC can do immediately snap its fingers and make up the rather significant gulf in revenue disparity that exists between itself and some of its peers. But, this is a step. This is something that they're looking at. They've kind of kicked around the broader pod idea, but I remember talking about this on the podcast. We'll do that to avoid confusion here. Somewhere in the area of 2016. So what is thrown out right now is not a true, what I would call a round robin pod, but more maybe permanent pairings with individual teams, or at least, formatted pairings for the time being with individual teams in areas, and then kind of going from there. So, we'll start a conversation with ACC scheduling.
Yeah, and obviously this came up last week. Last week I had to take some paternity leave, and then we had to go to I would say, I guess all funerals are not scheduled, but sorry for the layoff there. Just sometimes life gets in the way. We appreciate everybody's patience with that. But I thought this topic was interesting enough to keep on the sheet as opposed to punt, because it does really impact the future of the league that FSU is almost certainly going to be in for the next 10 years-ish, unless something weird happens, which, of course, maybe it could. But the reason they're doing this, I think, is to try to get the teams, to try to get all teams in the league to play each other more often. And they're not looking to get more Duke-Syracuse matchups, really. They're looking to have better matchups throughout the year, because right now you have quite an imbalance of divisions. I mean, if you stuck NC State in the Coastal, they would be the favorite to win the Coastal, right? I mean, if you stuck Wake in the Coastal, would Wake be the favorite to win the Coastal? When you get Sam Hartman coming back, they would have been the best team in the Coastal last year, other than Pitt, when they had Kenny Pickett. So you have probably 4 of the top 6 teams in the conference are consistently coming out of the Atlantic. And so you're having a lot of just bad games from the Coastal that ESPN's not really wanting to showcase. Whereas if you could break up some of these Atlantic teams, you may get some better matchups. The other thing this could do here is it's going to set up a situation where you're not having like East versus West or Atlantic versus Coastal play for the conference championship game. And recall that last year, the ACC and ESPN had their look-in window. Their contract they signed with that grant of rights had multiple look-in windows. And unless I missed it, I don't think they're getting paid any more money, or not substantially more than they were making before. And I think if they decided something there, they would have said it, because it would have been good PR. They don't have much of a product to sell right now.
Isn't that a giant red flag, Bud?
Game sucks.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but what's the look-in window? Every 5 years, something like that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Would
Your
it be
product's not
possible
very
for
good.
Clemson to have had a better 10-year run than they've had the last, since 2012 to 2022? For people who are like, oh, the ACC can play their way out of this, I just don't know if it's possible. I don't
No, they can't.
know that you have a dynamic TV product enough, even if you have a school like Clemson that's had the best 10-year run in their history, that's recruited a level of talent that they've never been able to get to that campus before. Doesn't seem to have moved the needle one bit at all on your TV deal. So that is interesting and concerning in its own right.
Clemson's not a national brand. It's just not going to create a huge national following. If you gave the ACC the truth serum, what school would they want to be the best? Now, they're not going to rig things to make it this way because they really wouldn't have done much different than they already have done. It would be Miami, right? Miami in a huge TV market. They were the bad boys of the 80s. I think second place would be Florida State as far as like what would be the absolute best for this league, right? Because when Miami's bad, the fans don't support. When Florida State's bad, the fans still support. So if you actually could get Miami to be like a nationally elite brand consistently, I think that'd be the absolute best thing for the ACC. Clemson is not really going to move the needle nationally. They're just, little old Clemson. They don't have that kind of long-term following. I mean, they won the title in 81, I think, and then they just took the next like 2 decades off essentially. But this will create better matchups almost certainly in the conference title game. It'll also create rematches, which you would think, oh, that's kind of terrible. But everybody liked that Clemson-Notre Dame rematch quite a bit 2 years ago when Notre Dame played as an ACC member during the COVID season. And if you are going to a 12-game playoff, which I still think is pretty likely, unless I guess you could stick at 4 if the SEC decides to do a 2-round playoff for the SEC, and just send their one champion to the CFP, which I don't think they're going to do that. I guess it's possible. As long as you go to a situation in which you have an expanded playoff, I really don't think having your best 2 teams play hurts you all that much. So better TV ratings for the conference title game, better matchups. On the TV revenue side, that's the play here for the ACC. Will it get ESPN to rip up the contract and give them a ton more money? I doubt it. But could they get some more money in the next look-in? I think it's certainly possible if certain schools, including the one we podcast about, get serious about football and start doing well on the field. I also think this is just a lot better for the fans, man. I mean, these divisions that they have right now are totally contrived. And like, do you feel like you have any real true division rivals that you're hyped up? Do you have any fans from Wake or Louisville who travel to Tallahassee every year? Not unless they got a kid on the team for the most part. So I think this is potentially much better for FSU as well to set up more regional rivalries and not having to play Boston College and Syracuse and all those schools every single year potentially.
Yeah, it would let you go through the conference a little bit more. Again, something that I've droned and moaned on about since the inception of this podcast is that whether it's Florida State, whether it's Miami, whatever the biggest brand is when it comes to this conference and what would be beneficial for this conference, the fact that you don't have them either play in or against the team from Atlanta, which is the kind of mecca of college football, for a lack of better phrasing, and certainly the largest media market in the country that is totally college football driven and dominated, is not a great thing. So I do think that the idea that Florida State and Georgia Tech would cross paths more frequently would be a good thing for the conference, would be a good thing for Florida State. I think there's some creative things here that could be done. I just don't know exactly where that ceiling is as far as, where you tap out at bringing in new revenue, or are you just kind of rearranging the chairs on the Titanic while the rest of the college football world, at least the rest of the college football world that you're concerned about, makes 3 times a year more than you do, et cetera, et cetera. I think the ACC has some good ideas. Wish they would have played with us earlier.
We've been suggesting this for a long time. Like, me and you on this show back in the SB Nation days, like I would chat with Bill Connolly about this a lot. He's been writing about, like, why do you have these fake, just made up divisions when you could actually get better better rotation and more familiarity through the schedule since probably 2011, I think. Now, part of this is that the ACC did not have the cachet to do this, and because if you recall, Jim Delaney, who was just an absolute gangster for the Big Ten, and look, he's got a lot better brands to play with. Okay, I mean, people care about the schools in the Big Ten much more than the ACC fans care about their own schools. They do. That's a much better hand to play.
And they graduate like 40 to 50,000 people a year from those schools. I mean,
right.
Those are big schools with
land grant universities that
still
are just
relatively significant high admission standard. I mean, good degrees and a degree, production house to an extent, or a factory line to an extent, as far as how many numbers that they spit out. And obviously, they've had the Big Ten network and all sorts of things. But what were you saying about Delaney?
Oh, so Delaney had passed a rule, I think this was in 2010, that said you have to have divisions to play a conference championship game, or you have to play a true round robin, which is how the rule got modified when Delaney's Big Ten raided the Big 12 to take Nebraska, and obviously Missouri and A&M left. So really, it has not been until very recently that you had enough leagues willing to say yes to vote on the idea that you do not need divisions to play a conference title game, right? So, like, while we can sit here and say that they should have done this, and I think they probably should have been pushing harder for it to try to rally some support from other leagues, technically it was not allowed until, for next year. So I guess I'll give them some break on that. Should we give the audience kind of a feel for what this could look like for FSU?
Sure. Yeah, we should. I do think before we do that, I do think that it's interesting that we're talking about 2010, 2011, and stuff like that. These like these conference decisions and stuff like that, these take 5, 6, 10 years to really see some of the ramifications come to light. And I think a lot of the ACC's, problems in 2022 are tied to leadership decisions made in 2008, 2010, 2012, etc. So while Bud and I may be pessimistic about what this ultimately will mean, it is good to start implementing smart, proactive ideas for this conference, with the idea that, these things take 3, 4, 5 years to start spitting off positive results and to start really having an impact. And what that impact might be for the ACC is that, Florida State and Georgia Tech would see each other a lot more frequently. I don't think the Miami game is necessarily in question. I do, Bud, wonder if Florida State and Clemson have to play each other each year. I mean, that's
I'm glad you went there.
I don't think that's permanent, to be honest with you. I could very well see us living in a day where Florida State and Clemson play 2 times, 3 times out of 5 years or something like that. I don't know that you have to see Clemson every year. And I think for the TV product, it would be good, but it's not the end of the world. And it would be a good thing for Florida State, potentially, not to have that matchup every year.
So this is a really interesting question that you bring up. And I want to start with the Georgia Tech thing real quickly. Had you not had the COVID season, can you recall the last time Georgia Tech came to Tallahassee?
Was it that Lightning game?
Yeah, I think it was 2009.
Wow. Okay.
So Georgia Tech, who is your closest geographic rival in terms of driving distance from campus. Now, obviously, Miami is closer for, I think, most of FSU's alumni, just based on where they live. But, it's close. I mean, the next time they would have been scheduled to come, I think, was 22 or 23. Because they come this year to Tallahassee. Mm-hmm. The game where they came during the COVID season, that was not on the schedule. That was a made-up schedule for COVID-specific reasons when you scrapped divisions and you went and added Notre Dame for that 1 year. This is sort of similar to how Texas A&M joined the SEC when? 2012? No. When was... Because Manziel was the 2012 year, right? I'm trying to think. Maybe they joined in 11. So, do you know that Georgia has never played a road game at A&M yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And A&M's been in the league for a decade now. That's kind of the similar thing. Like when is the last time that, give me another team that just like is way far away from coming to Tallahassee here? When's the last time that, well, the Hokies came in what? Willie's first year. Virginia. When's the last time UVA came to Tally? I'm not arguing that they need to come to Tally anytime soon. It's not like they bring fans, but it does show just the when you get beyond like 12 teams in a league, it really does feel more just like a scheduling alliance.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't really have these familiarity with these teams. So it would be great to see whether Georgia Tech is in your protected rivalries pod, which I think they should be, and I think they will be. But I guess that's up for some debate. I guess FSU was pushing for Syracuse, which we can get into in a second why we think they were doing so. Getting to play all these other teams more often is a benefit. You're not going to drop the Miami game. The Clemson one is interesting. I think Mike Alford would tell you we absolutely want Clemson every year, mainly for ticket sales, right? Like imagine trying to sell the season ticket package in a year where Florida's on the road, Miami's at home, and you don't get Clemson. So from a ticket sales perspective, you definitely want Clemson. Now, from a making the ACC title game perspective, that is certainly a more difficult draw. Maybe the counter to that is, hey, if you're worried about that, maybe you shouldn't be going to the ACC title game anyway, potentially. So I think it's probably better if they have Clemson on there for the overall like health of the program as far as ticket sales. But it will add more losses to your schedule than having, maybe NC State or Louisville as an annual. And Louisville's going to get screwed in this because they don't have any traditional rivalry. So they're probably going to end up with like a Wake Forest, Syracuse, something else.
Yeah, Pitt, something like that.
Yeah, right, exactly. Now, from an ESPN perspective, because the ACC met with ESPN the day after the conference meetings, that was last week. I suspect that ESPN is going to say, we really insist that you put FSU and Clemson in the same scheduling thing because it gives us a chance to have a bite at that apple twice every year. And like the word we were getting just from TV people is that they really don't care a lot about these mid-level matchups at all. Like it's like, well, hey, if you don't play Florida State Clemson every year, you're freed up to have Clemson 3 times and Florida State 3 times against sort of mid-level teams. And maybe the one name will carry that brand. And the word we were getting was like, hey, the value in these TV deals for these TV networks is really just in the very top matchups. We don't really give a damn about Clemson and NC State. It's an exciting game. It's just not going to move the needle. Clemson, Florida State will move the needle, even if those teams are not great because of the names, which I think also gets to your point, man, of like this league's not going to get out of this thing because even if like NC State gets good consistently, most of the country won't notice or care.
No.
And ESPN is not going to be willing to pay for serious TV. Like there's not those serious TV brands in here, especially independent of market.
Independent of market. Interesting phrasing there. Yeah. I certainly, yeah. Long term, I think NC State actually might end up being one of your better properties, but that's a discussion for like 20 years down the road.
Oh, Raleigh's coming up.
Yeah, what happens with Raleigh in that part of the country? But again, that's another discussion for another time. Syracuse, it's interesting. I mean, Alford said Syracuse. I told you that I had heard some chatter 6 months ago about maybe Boston College being included. I think those two things are tied together. I mean, you're both looking at markets and, in my opinion, having a conversation that's probably more appropriate 15 years ago when you're talking about college athletics and market size and stuff like that. But let's just jump into that real quickly because I think that's an interesting thing to hear from your athletic director.
Yeah, and this is from Andy Staples of The Athletic on Twitter, who said that they were told that Florida State wanted Syracuse, and that was in response to me saying I think they'd have to get Georgia Tech in there because obviously, like Georgia Tech for the fan experience is just much better. You know any people who went to Syracuse? I mean, I do because I work in media.
Right. I was going to say, yeah. No, haven't met any yet.
Yeah, you're not going to see those folks at the water cooler very often. It does feel like there's like a year late or a decade late sometimes on some of this market stuff. I'm not really sure the market stuff matters very much at all anymore, right? Especially as we go to more streaming content and more on-demand style content. What's going to matter is the demand, not the region.
Yeah. That is a little bit perplexing to me. I think I understand where it's coming from. I think it's exactly what you're talking about. I think it's the idea of trying to put, what are your bigger brands in one of these larger media markets. But again, I don't know how much traction you get. I don't even know what you get out of Syracuse, to be honest with you. I certainly don't. I'm not going to sit here and look at you and tell our listeners that brings you to the New York market or anything else. Boston College gets about as much media attention as a large high school football game does in Atlanta.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not, you're not getting the Boston market, nor are you eating there. When you talk about playing Boston College and getting that game. So it's an interesting situation. I can see the appeal in theory. Again, I can see the appeal if we're talking about a perspective or a point of view that's 20 years ago when you talked about college athletics. But I would be shocked ultimately if Florida State is paired with one of these larger Northeastern schools.
Yeah, I would be very disappointed if you do this and you don't get Georgia Tech annually. I mean, I think it is important that your fans have the ability to drive to 3 games annually. One of the things the SEC has is that you can drive, if you want to over half of your games for almost any team, right? Like if you're UF, you can drive the Georgia game, the South Carolina game. You could drive to Tennessee, right? I mean,
it's pretty fairly easy. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's probably 9 hours up 75.
You could drive to LSU. I mean, we flew to Baton Rouge because I'm not going to have Mags drive with 2 kids under 2 because I was coming from a different location. But like you can, it's like a 12-hour drive from Orlando ish, and you get the time zone change. Florida's not even the best example of that potentially, right? If you're UGA, I mean, you can drive to all of your games.
Or if you're in Tuscaloosa, if you're in Alabama, you can drive to every game you have. You really can.
Right. And that's not realistic in the ACC, but I think that is an important part of the fan experience, to be able to go somewhere, tailgate, walk around campus, see everything, all that kind of deal. I'd be pretty disappointed if they are thinking about markets here when I think markets are largely not that important anymore. And, and they take away an opportunity to drive. And I think Georgia Tech fans actually, not that there's a ton of them, but the ones that are actually Georgia Tech fans, they will drive. They'll make that drive. You'll see some decent number of Georgia Tech fans in Tallahassee, even with a terrible team this fall.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just can't tell me you're making decisions based off market and then not put Georgia Tech and Florida State together.
Right.
It kind of doesn't work. So,
one last thing I wanted to mention here, and credit to Ralph Russo for bringing this up. Talking about like the ACC's grant of rights and, can anybody get out of this thing? And if the ACC is a sinking ship, blah, 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 which I think, it could be, certainly. There's not a lot of optimism, he said, that Texas and Oklahoma are going to be able to get out of their deal early. Now, the Big 12 grant of rights is not seen as strong as the ACC's is. And in theory, I mean, couldn't the SEC just loan those guys the money to get out early so they can go do what they want? They'd make it back. I mean, it'd be a loan, obviously, but like if you're conference members, you're conference members, and we'll just take it out of your new rev share over time. I mean, they would need to come up with like $100 million each to get out of like 2 years early of that Big 12 deal. First of all, I don't think that's really realistic for FSU and Clemson and those schools to come up with, because they would need a lot more than that to wipe out a decade of grant of rights stuff.
Don't you have to get to 9 to member institutions to blow up the grant of rights for the ACC?
Yeah, because it would need to be on like 5 left. Or do you mean like they need to have under 10 teams?
I think you'd have to have 9 teams agree to blow this conference up for the grant of rights not to be in play. Right. I'm grabbing it, information from a while ago. But my point is here, you have to have 9 people go out on a limb. Now, what I could see with the ACC is that somebody just sits out there and goes ahead and makes the announcement and realizes that it's not going to happen immediately, and they just kind of facilitate the skepticism of the conference even further. But yeah, no, there's no loans that are going to be thrown out for the 9 member institutions that try to blow up this conference and leave 4 years early or 6 years early or whatever.
Do you think you have 9 who want to get out? And follow up, do you think you have 9 who have a destination? I don't think you have 9 properties that somebody else would want to take in this league.
You can get to 6, 7, and 8 pretty quickly, and then it gets tough.
Like, are you counting North Carolina?
I am, yes.
Are you counting NC State?
No.
Okay. Are you counting Louisville?
No.
Here. All right. Florida State, Miami, Clemson, UNC.
Duke has a place, despite being Duke.
For hoops?
Yeah.
Well, Duke's endowment apparently went up a ridiculous amount in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And now they are, they have a top quarter coaching salary pool now in the league, I was told.
I don't doubt
because it. Because their endowment just hit it really, really big on some startup companies. So if you wanted to know why Elko went to Duke, that's probably why.
Okay. Virginia Tech, in my opinion, would have a landing place somewhere.
Just because of geography into the SEC
and their fan base. I mean, they have an attractive fan base for somebody. That's what's one of the more passionate fan bases in this conference.
Yeah, they do care.
And then I start to struggle from there. And we're at 6 or 7 at this point.
I think we got the 5. No, Duke 6. Okay, yeah.
Virginia Tech would be set. Well, all right.
If you're the SEC, you don't need to take UNC and NC State, right?
No, you don't. NC State, and that's why. I mean, all this stuff, politics get involved. Who the governor is at the time gets involved. You're going to have a hard time in North Carolina. I mean, it's going to be real tricky.
Hard time in Virginia.
Yeah, in my opinion, the attractive brands. Just real quickly: Miami, Florida State, Clemson, Georgia Tech, UNC. I would add UVA to this to an extent, but you may disagree with me there.
I think Georgia Tech is attractive from a market perspective, but not as much to the SEC.
No, I think they're a better fit for the Big 12. I mean, yeah, the
Big
Georgia
10.
Tech and the Big 10, excuse me. Georgia Tech and the SEC have their own history there. Yeah, so that's kind of where I can get to 7 or 8 that are. I'm not saying they're the belle of the ball, but they have nice things. I think they'd find a landing place, and
it's a lot of coordination you have to achieve, man. A lot of coordination, because you need all these teams to be able to get out of it, to keep their mouths shut, and then all of them to find landing spots at roughly the same times.
Well, and what you would need is you'd need the Big 10 to come in and eat 6 of these schools at once. That's what you'd have to have. Something like that.
Unless the Big 12 suddenly found a whole lot of money somehow. Maybe they're the league that figures out how to get the Amazon or the Netflix deal or whatever. Actually talked about this on Cover 3 a little bit. I do think the Big 12 could be a really interesting gambling adjacent conference because they have so many evenly matched teams and no real elite teams that you're going to have so many games come down to the fourth. And I feel like eventually we're going to have live gambling on our TVs to where you can bet on games through your remote, live betting. What better game to do that with than a league that is coming down to all 4 quarters?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I brought up the Big 12 part just because I feel like if Oklahoma and Texas are not likely to get the money to get out early when they want to,
right?
Ain't no way Florida State and Clemson are.
Yeah, and those are 2 institutions that can almost light money on fire for fun. Yeah. I mean, that it's just different.
But $100 million is still a little bit different, But who knows? Maybe if California law passes, maybe we'll see a drastic transformation, man. We don't have time to talk about it today. I just wanted to. That's something on the horizon. that is very interesting to me. So, let's see. Something that I am more confident in than the ACC is a legendary team.
So we've got a bunch of different listener emails and questions we'll get to in the process of grabbing that. I actually saw an email from Jared, and I thought this could be as good of a message as possible when it comes to working with Shannon and Chad and the group over there that we've been so fortunate to have the relationship that we have. Jared writes, wanted to send a quick email and let you know my experience with Chad and the legendary team and Shannon and the legendary team. I worked with Shannon 2 earlier times, late in 2019, then again in 2020, for multiple different reasons, ended up not buying. Now, the third time was the charm for me. My fiance and I got proved within one business day, actually reached out to Shannon on a Friday morning, and he worked out our package over the weekend with the approval coming on Monday by lunchtime. He was always super responsive, worked with us in every possible question we had and to find an answer to it. Just wanted to let you guys know the Nolecast and the legendary team make a great partnership, and I'm happy to have played a part in that partnership. Keep making the great product. Jared, thank you so much for the email. Look, we hear nothing but great things about Shannon all the time, and Chad's interesting and entrepreneurial guy in his own right, and we love working with him. It's a different market out there, y'all, and you don't need your friendly college football podcaster to tell you that. It's competitive. Rates have changed. Products that are appealing 3 months ago are maybe not as appealing now. There's no better time to work with Shannon and to have that guy walk you through this process in the way that he does, as responsive and professional as anybody that you could hope to work with in this arena. Great people for us, great people for we're real close to 400, dog. Just remarkable, the response that we've had, and we'd continue to push our listeners in the direction of, in our opinion, the best people in the home mortgage field.
No doubt about it. As you said, rates have certainly changed somewhat, but inventory may also be changing. And I mean, I can't tell you how many folks like made offers on houses and lost them to just straight cash, homie. Right? To steal the old Randy Moss line. That there may be a little bit less of that right now. So like you may be in a better spot to actually get a home. It's great to like get one in theory, but actually getting one is pretty cool. Really appreciate the email there. That is awesome. And we really love working with Shannon and Chad. 844-FSU loan is the number to call. You want to do, let's go to listener questions. I had some recruiting updates. Two things I got just real quick.
Yeah, please.
I heard they felt better about Antavius Woody. Right. Okay. So that could potentially be something really nice there. I think he is one of the higher potential kids in your class that you just signed. So, hey, how does this look if you're not going to sign a bunch of 5-stars? You probably hit on a couple of those guys in the process of getting, quote unquote, back. They do still definitely want to take a DB through either the transfer portal or through the JUCO market. I do still think that they are keeping their eye on some kids who could be graduate transfers, by the way. So we'll see how that goes. Listener questions?
We've got a bunch of them. We're not going to be able to get to all of them this morning. A little bit of a tough schedule.
I think we can do like a 30-minute mailbag another morning this week.
Yeah, I think we can roll these over, and we'll throw up a Patreon pin for those who want to continue to contribute. Big thanks to our Patreons, as always, patreon.com/Nolecast if you have an interest in further supporting the show. Jeff says he's been listening to the Nolecast since 2016 and hadn't missed an episode. Jeff, that's very impressive. And he submitted multiple 5-star reviews. Jeff, that's even more impressive and appreciated.
Good to know. You can do multiples, by the way, guys. Not like every day, but if you wait a little bit, you can throw another 5-star on there. It's great.
There is some window of time, yes. Currently living in Los Angeles and looking forward to a trip to Tarpon Cellars next time he's in Napa. My question, after listening to another pod that discussed Georgia and their recruiting success and, quote, commitment to recruiting under Kirby as compared to the way the programs like Cincinnati, Utah, Iowa State, Baylor recruit and develop that may not have the same Georgia, Bama, Ohio State level of resources. My question is FSU a victim of its own historical success by not adapting quickly enough to today's college football landscape and realizing it appears to be a program more like the schools mentioned that have lesser financial resources but excel at player development in order to help kids get drafted and still compete at the highest level? Instead of fishing in the same Bama, Georgia waters, should they be focused on kids with certain measurables, and a larger emphasis on player development to maximize a lesser heralded recruit's potential? I've heard the mention of Florida State being more like the Tampa Bay Rays or Moneyball references on the pod in this way. Is there a blueprint these schools have that Florida State should be following, or is Mike Norvell and staff already doing this, in your opinion? Can't think of two better people to dive in the subject than Bud and Ingram. Thank you for your content over the years. Lifelong Nole fan. Jeff, thank you so much for your email.
Jeff, that's a really interesting question. I want to pick it apart a little bit. I don't like 100% disagree, but I kind of like 70% disagree. So I like those questions.
I think I 70% agree. So good. This will be good.
Perfect. I like this. So first, I think it is, even if Jeff was right about this, and I don't totally think he is, I think it is too early to try to switch to that model. FSU right now is a victim of some pretty bad circumstance, I think, in terms of when Mike took over, and they just had two really ill-timed coaching changes. First one was with the whole early signing period issue, and the next one, obviously, Mike came, and then they had the whole COVID thing. Right now on the trail, they don't have a whole lot of momentum, and I believe that is because they have run out of their sort of new coach smell juice, and you have two other programs in Florida that are able to sell a vision. At this point, Florida State is not going to be able to sell a vision. It is going to have to sell proof of concept. I 100% believe that FSU can still recruit at a very high level, not like hidden gems, high level, if they either A, start winning, or B, if they don't win, get another coach in, restart the new coach smell cycle, for the 2024 year. Not recruiting class, but for the 2024, calendar year. One of those two things is likely to happen, right? Either you win or you're going to have a new staff. I think the staff understands that. They're not idiots. Like, they know they have quite a bit of leash, but eventually you do have to start winning some games and recruiting at a higher level. Here's a couple things to think about this. Utah, Iowa State, and Baylor don't actually play at the highest level, right? Iowa State just went, where they go, 8-4, I think. I just did the Iowa State summer school series for the Cover 3 pod, where I go through every single team in the country, basically. 8-4 is like the second best season Iowa State has had in like the last 100 years. Okay? Utah has had a couple very nice seasons. They're still not competing at the highest level. Ohio State had a ton of opt-outs in that Rose Bowl game and still won against Utah. Baylor, again, I don't think they're competing at the highest level. The point here is that Cincinnati, Utah, Iowa State, and Baylor fans have very different expectations than what Florida State fans have. And I like that Jeff put in the victim of their own success, because in some ways he is right about this. Not in terms of being stuck in like thinking they can do this, but I think FSU has to try to recruit at that level. I'm not really sure how many Florida State fans are diehard enough to where if this program did sink a little bit, and it's like, hey, like, let's just compete for conference championships, that type of thing. I'm not really sure how many would support. A lot of these FSU fans joined when it came of an age where you were in the national title hunt. I'm not really sure how many Baylor, Iowa State, Utah fans or Cincinnati fans joined due to being in a national title hunt. Probably zero.
Yeah.
Also, Baylor has a ton of money. Like, I would not lump Baylor in to that thing. Baylor has an absolute crap ton of money. They're at a different level than those other schools mentioned.
Yeah. And at this point are possibly the most, preeminent Texas-based school in the Big 12.
Yeah.
It'll be
also geography too, man. Like, those schools all have poor geography, except for, well, even Waco is kind of crappy geography. Like, it's not easy to get to Waco. FSU doesn't fit in with that geography. Like, Georgia, Bama, Ohio State geography is much more aligned with what the Noles have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So where I'm in agreement with the question is that, and I'm not trying to take shots at anybody here, but I was relieved to see that the Tim Brewster thing didn't work out, because I think the worst thing that can happen to Florida State at this point in their recruiting process is to convince themselves that they have a chance to sign a high 4-star, 5-star prospect that they don't. I think you have to be very selective with your battles here. I don't think you're uh, recruiting Sisters of the Poor or something like that. I'm not trying to tell this fan base that they're not going to sign prospects. They do. You and I are somewhat in agreement. Florida State's still got a bright future when it comes to recruiting. But I do think you have to be selective with where you try to fight those battles. You have to realize that, in my opinion, over the next 3 or 4 years, absent some kind of super strong relationship, you're probably not going to sign the top tackle in the country or top defensive, top 3 high school defensive tackle, something like that. Florida State, in my opinion, does need to do a great job of bringing in enough pieces each year to where there's a positive culture, there's a positive what's needed to play is conducive for ultimately being a successful team as far as a 12-month program that's continually kind of feeding off of itself in competition, is pushing and ultimately internally developing the team. So not wildly different takes when we talk about this, but I do think Florida State's got to be real careful about having people on staff telling them, "Oh, we got this wrapped up," etc. When
they just went through last year,
when you just did that, when you just shot yourself in the foot, convinced, whether it was convenient or whatever else in a lot of meetings where, yeah, we're good. Well, yeah, you weren't so good on a lot of the situations. So I think you've got to be careful with how you pick your battles, where they come. But ultimately, I think Florida State can sign a class full of exciting high 3-star prospects and really good 4-star players. And that's what you got to do. And you got to develop the hell out of them. And you got to, pride yourself, brand yourself, whatever, on being a talent, developer, and that you're not going to sign 7 of the top 100 kids in the country or something like that for the foreseeable future. So slightly different opinions. When we talk about it, we might be slightly more on the same page than I first realized, but really interesting question. And thank you so much for your feedback.
It's also, I think we could both agree that it is too early to write any program as being like, you definitely need to go this route for the long term, because we really have no idea what's going to happen in the sport coming up, right? Like, it wouldn't shock me if 7 years from now we're able to sign kids out of high school to 4-year deals. You know what I mean?
Right.
To where like we're not having transfer portal because you're locked in, or maybe with a buyout. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying?
No,
here?
it would just be brilliant to have a buyout on I mean, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, would you put it past college sports to try to make money on these kids in a different way? I wouldn't. I mean, they do it with the coaches. And recall that 25 years ago this month, the NCAA was sued by college coaches because the NCAA like conspired to limit coaching compensation. And they're like, it's kind of anti-competitive, I would say. Not real American there, NCAA. But I mean, I think with like one thing the Rays do well is they lock up some of their young players for the long term, and it wouldn't shock me if eventually we get to a situation where, hey, maybe you get a kid instead of Bama because you find him and you sign him early and you're willing to take the risk on him earlier in the process. And maybe you're right, and they wanted to see more out of him. They wouldn't offer him that big time deal, in June before his senior year or whatever. So I think it's too early. You do have to do a good job of scouting development. The way the transfer portal is set up right now is not going to be the way it's set up forever, because it's, I think, untenable long term. I think it's probably a good thing that we have what is happening right now, because it's going to speed up, I think, what needs to happen to the sport, because it is a little bit craziness right now. But under the current landscape, like, if you find a guy and develop him, you still got to find a way to keep him. Sort of the same thing with the coach.
Mm-hmm. We have 2 Chris Parson based questions from Tyler and Cade, very similar, but they both are kind of based off how he performed recently in Elite 11 competition and whether or not you would see that ranking adjust accordingly, or basically what Parsons' ranking looks like moving forward, and whether or not you see 247 touching where he's currently listed.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to talk to anybody about this yet because I literally just got back in last night from the funeral, and it was over the weekend. He went to the Elite 11 in Nashville. However, Cooper Patagna has a really good write-up on this on 24/7 Sports, which I would encourage you guys to read. Cooper, longtime college scout, now works for us, was Chris Peterson's guy there at Washington, also worked, Michigan Harbaugh and for Cristobal. So certainly knows a thing or two about player acquisition. Generally, we write these top performers in order of like most impressive down the line. So he has 3 names at the top. 3 guys got invites to the Elite 11 finals in California. We don't always agree with the dudes who got the invites, by the way. Like, I think Elite 11 is doing a better job now of having more humility and realizing that they're not like the be all end all of QB evaluation. They used to try to take like these project guys to the finals, and it was just, I was like, oh my God, like this dude doesn't belong. This guy's like literally 5'6". Like, what are we doing? Like, okay, he's a competitor. Who cares? Like, great. Now they're doing a better job, I think, of taking the kids who are legitimately the best and not trying to get cute with it. Anyway, 3 guys got invites. None of them were Chris Parsons. Next kid mentioned was Malachi Singleton, which I thought was interesting. He's committed to Arkansas. And then CJ Carr, who's at 24, got mentioned. And then Marcel Reed got mentioned. So Chris Parsons got 1 line and was mentioned with 3 other kids in that same line. If I'm reading the tea leaves here, and again, I haven't talked to Coop, so I'm not going to speak out of school. Based solely on that article, I don't think that, and the line was Ole Miss commit Marcel Reed, Florida State Chris Parsons, and Pittsburgh commit Kenny Minchey all had their moments throughout Sunday's event. Reed appears to possess the most upside as a passer out of the bunch as he continues to fill out his frame. Both Parsons and Minchey were steady throughout the day.
Yeah.
That doesn't suggest to me that like Parsons tore it up or that like he's like, oh my God, like we definitely had this kid rated wrong or anything like that. I have said on the show many times, I think you have too, this staff seems to like Parsons a lot more than other college staffs do.
Committed to, if we rewind 3.5 minutes ago, Florida State would have been willing to give that contract to Parsons before any other school did. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
right, exactly. They're betting on their evaluation of Parsons.
They saw something that others did not, and that's interesting. And well, I don't want to say others did not, but they put more stock into it. And I think Carson's a nice prospect. I just think if your own internal validation on Chris Parsons is to see him ranked as the 102nd prospect in the country or something like that, I don't think that's going to come to fruition. You've got to trust
as a top 25 QB.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like,
what's he national? 300 something?
He's. I can't get to that right now.
Well, that's bad podcasting on my part.
I just
they do some research for me, but yeah. So that's where it is. I think you can be excited about Parsons and be encouraged by what he's going to bring. Again, I just don't think you're going to have that validation of seeing him be a high 4-star, flirting with anything other than that. So we still got some decent questions. Like you said, we'll throw up a mailbag, circle back to it. Good to be able to get something out this morning to our listeners. My beloved Glasgow Rangers are playing in a European final today if you want to talk about Moneyball, on a starting 11 players, averaging up to about $14 million in transfer fees, which is basically hilarious. And, Chelsea would probably pay $30 million for a backup left back. So I had to get it in this morning because I'm going to be a wreck and distracted the rest of the day. Bud, thank you for making it available after your bereavement situation. My best to Maggie and her family, and certainly happy to be able to get something out to our listeners. And like you said, we'll have something either later this week or over the weekend for a Sunday, Monday publish of a mailbag. So as always, thank you to our sponsors. We will be back with you here later on in the week. And until then, this has been the Nolecast.
Enjoy it, buddy.